Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea confirms more than 300 new cases of the coronavirus. So far, the highest number of infections in a single day. Another death reported as well, as the government urges people to avoid crowded places. The Bank of Korea keeps its key interest rate steady at 1.25%. Despite speculation it might cut because of the coronavirus. But it does lower its GDP growth forecast for this year slightly to 2.1%. And with COVID-19 causing a shortage of protective face masks, the government is going to be supplying millions of them to public sector retailers starting next month. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. So far, South Korea has reported more than 1,500 confirmed cases and 13 deaths. For the latest on the coronavirus, we have our Kan Hyung-woo on the line. Hyung-woo, hundreds more infections were confirmed just today.
Right, Devin. South Korea confirmed 334 more coronavirus cases on Thursday. This brings the total number in the country to 1,595. This is the highest number of infections in a single day. Over 80% of the confirmed patients were in the southeastern city of Daegu and the surrounding Gyeongsangbuk-do province. South Korea also reported its 13th death earlier today. The 74-year-old man from Daegu was one of those related to the Shincheonji religious group. He was tested for the virus on Sunday, and the results came back positive on Tuesday. He seemed to have no severe symptoms other than fever and a cough, but started to have difficulty breathing on Thursday morning and died after CPR. Some 21,000 people are still being tested for the virus. So far, 24 patients have been released from quarantine after making full recoveries.
Hyung-woo, because the virus is spreading so fast, the Korean government's urging people not to go to big gatherings or other places with a lot of people. How are things going in that regard?
Right, the central government is urging welfare and daycare centers where the young and elderly visit to temporarily close down for the next 10 days.
The shutdown period is from Friday, February 28th to Sunday, March 8th. This applies to 14 types of facilities and services, including welfare centers for the elderly and disabled.
The Korean government is also tracking down the members of the Shincheonji religious group, which has been linked to the fast spread of the virus. Since the nation's 31st patient, who turned out to be a Shincheonji follower, was reported in Daegu on February 18th, the number of confirmed cases in South Korea has skyrocketed. The central government has delivered a list of some 210,000 members of the Shincheonji religious group to local governments so they can figure out the whereabouts of the religious members and test those who show symptoms of the virus.
All right, Kang Hyung-woo reporting there. Thank you for that. Meanwhile, in China has reported 433 new coronavirus cases on Thursday, with 29 additional deaths. The total number of confirmed cases in China has now reached 78,497. The number of new deaths, however, is the lowest for a single day since January 28th. In Europe, France has reported the first death of one of its citizens. The authorities there said Wednesday that a 60-year-old man died in a Paris hospital, making him the second person of any nationality to die from the virus in France. The country now has 18 confirmed cases. Brazil announced its first case on Wednesday, and this was the first time the virus has been reported in South America. Nearly 2 months have passed since the first COVID-19 report in Wuhan, and it's now on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. At the Blue House, South Korean President Moon Jae-in said today that while the government's priority is to swiftly contain the COVID-19 outbreak, it's also the responsibility of the government to take care of the economy and public welfare. The president was speaking in a briefing by the Land and Oceans Ministry. Take a listen.
경제 활력입니다. 코로나19는 이미 우리 경제에 큰 타격을 주고 있습니다. 직접적인 피해를 겪고 있는 항공과 해운업에 대한 지원을 포함해서 두 부처의 역할을 최대한 살려 경제 활력을 되살리는 데 앞장서 주길 바랍니다.
The president also discussed real estate policy, once again stressing that the core principle is to protect the people who actually live in their homes and to stop speculation. In the meeting, the land minister laid out 8 specific strategies to expand public rental homes and stabilize housing prices. The oceans minister also presented plans to revive the shipping industry by building dozens of large container ships and expanding its overseas marketing. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa spoke on the phone Wednesday with her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, whom she told she's concerned about what she called China's excessive quarantine measures on South Korean nationals. A total of 114 South Koreans have been quarantined upon arrival in the Chinese cities of Weihai and Nanjing. The ministry's view is that China should take into account South Korea's own quarantine capabilities and the assistance it's given China since the start of the outbreak. However, China's state-run Global Times newspaper released an op-ed saying that the quarantine measures should not be seen as a diplomatic issue, but as a move to stop the outbreak. It said China cannot afford for the situation to get worse. U.S. President Donald Trump held a press conference at the White House on Wednesday on his government's response to the outbreak. He said the risk to the U.S. is low, but he did not rule out restrictions on travel to South Korea. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
Asked about whether the U.S. is going to restrict travel to and from South Korea and Italy, President Trump said he may do that at the right time, but that's not now. Speaking at a press conference at the White House on Wednesday, he added they are checking many people coming in from South Korea, Italy, and China, which are among the worst-hit countries at the moment. The U.S. State Department earlier issued a Level 2 travel advisory for South Korea. President Trump said his administration is doing well in dealing with the coronavirus, as they have tightened screening and quarantine measures.
But we're very, very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level, and we want to keep it that way.
He insisted the coronavirus risk in the U.S. is low and said there are only 15 confirmed cases, most of whom are recovering. However, U.S. health authorities say there are around 60 confirmed cases in the U.S. President Trump said the U.S. is rapidly developing vaccines and is working with other countries to contain the virus. Trump added he recently had a long talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping and said the situation there seems to have calmed down. He also announced he is charging Vice President Mike Pence with leading the U.S. coronavirus response, saying, quote, he's got a certain talent for this. The president also said his administration is working with Congress for financial support to battle the coronavirus. The amount of money is expected to be at least $2.5 billion and perhaps as much as $8 billion. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. have decided to postpone the joint military exercise that was set for March until further notice. This is the first time a disease outbreak has caused the allies to postpone a planned joint drill. The Combined Forces Command and Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said Thursday that they took into account the fact that the South Korean government raised its alert for the virus to the highest level. They said they're prioritizing containment and the safety of their service members. But despite the postponed exercise, the allies say they're committed to maintaining a robust defense posture. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says North Korea is developing nuclear weapons as a way of trying to achieve legitimacy. He added U.S. forces are keeping a high state of military readiness to counter any provocations. Park Se-young has more.
In a written statement to the House Armed Services Committee on Wednesday, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said North Korea, quote, seeks to build legitimacy through the development of a variety of nuclear, conventional, and unconventional weapons and by growing its ballistic missile capabilities. And due to the continued threat posed by Pyongyang, U.S. forces in South Korea remain on a high state of readiness alongside their South Korean counterparts. Esper added that while the U.S. supports diplomatic efforts to bring lasting peace to the Korean peninsula, the forces are prepared to, quote, fight and win tonight if required. Mark Milley, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, also alluded to North Korea's continued threat in a statement to the committee and stressed the need to have a forced posture to deter and defend against the threats. He added the national defense strategy prioritizes support for the long-term competition between China and Russia, followed by efforts to counter Iran and North Korea. At a seminar in Washington on Wednesday, the U.S. Deputy Special Representative for North Korea Alex Wong said the U.S. will continue its denuclearization negotiations with North Korea when it's ready to talk. He said the talks, which have been stalled since the no-deal summit in Hanoi last February, will be set in motion when Pyongyang is, quote, ready to seize the opportunities that we have before us. 박세영, Arirang News.
In today's meeting, South Korea's central bank decided to keep its key rate at 1.25%, despite the effects of the coronavirus on the economy. But because of the outbreak, it's cut its economic growth forecast for this year. Our Ji-young has the details.
The Bank of Korea on Thursday kept its benchmark rate at 1.25% for February. It has kept its key rate frozen since October last year when it lowered the rate by 25 basis points to support the domestic economy. The rate is currently at an all-time low. The central bank was widely expected to cut its benchmark interest rate on Thursday in a bid to offset the economic impact caused by the coronavirus outbreak. But despite the worsening business sentiment, the BOK decided to freeze the interest rate as lower rates have risks of their own. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said at a press briefing on Thursday that the bank decided to hold the rate steady as the contraction of local demand and production is largely due to uncertainties over the COVID-19 outbreak rather than economic factors. The decision is also a reflection of the worries over the country's growing household debt levels. Also announced on Thursday, the central bank forecast the local economy to grow by 2.1% this year, down 0.2 percentage points from what it had forecast last November. The downgrade reflects contracted business activities both at home and abroad due to the coronavirus outbreak. The central bank's Monetary Policy Board noted in a statement that the country's economic growth rate has slowed down. It said due to the spread of COVID-19, consumption has contracted and exports have slowed. During the press briefing, Lee said that there is a possibility that the South Korean economy could contract in the first quarter of this year due to the economic hit from the outbreak. He added that the Bank of Korea's forecasts assume that the outbreak will peak in March and then settle down. But the central bank kept its economic growth forecast for 2021 at 2.4%. Ji-young, Arirang News.
The coronavirus has caused shortages of protective face masks in South Korea. Now the government, as soon as today, will start supplying more of them to pharmacies and certain public sector retailers. Our Kim Jae-hee has this report.
Faced with a shortage of protective face masks within the country, the South Korean government says it will make sure that masks are supplied each day to state-run or public retailers, starting as early as Thursday afternoon.
1 million masks will be supplied to the city of Daegu and to Gyeongsang-buk-do province. 3.5 million masks will be supplied every day to public retailers such as Korea Post, Nonghyab, and pharmacies. Also, 500,000 face masks will be distributed each day to medical institutions and quarantine sites.
With clusters of coronavirus cases being confirmed in Daegu, long lines can be seen at supermarkets in the city with customers waiting to purchase protective masks. To prevent mask hoarding amid soaring demand, each buyer will be limited to 5 masks. However, with the rapid rise in the demand for masks, it may take some time to implement these measures. A post office designated as the public distributor released an official statement saying that actual distribution will likely be possible from the beginning of March. Meanwhile, online prices for masks have risen. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, the average online price for KF94 masks have increased to around $3.3. Before the coronavirus outbreak, purchasing masks online was cheaper than buying them in stores, but now it's more expensive to buy them online. With mask shortages becoming an issue, the government says it's okay to reuse masks that have already been worn.
Experts do not necessarily recommend reusing masks. But if you don't have a new mask to replace your old one, you can reuse some of your used masks as long as you use your own mask.
With the coronavirus outbreak expected to last for a while, the demand for masks is likely to remain high for the time being. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
With people trying to protect themselves by staying away from crowds, ticket sales have plunged for things like concerts, musicals, and operas. According to the Korea Performing Arts Box Office Information System, or KOPIS, ticket sales are down 43% in February compared to last month and are down more than 10% from a year ago. February is normally a quieter month for the performing arts, Kopis says, but it's been hit hard anyway. Some performances have been canceled through early March, including concerts by the KBS Symphony Orchestra and the Korean Symphony Orchestra. The Seoul Metropolitan Government is spending just over $1 million to disinfect churches and temples in the city. This comes as more than half of the confirmed cases so far have been linked to the religious group known as Shincheonji. Some churches, including the Catholic Church, have suspended services. A city official said he hopes the disinfection work will ease people's anxiety about going to religious facilities in general. Each of the 25 districts in Seoul will receive around $41,000. The districts will then survey the demand for disinfection among churches and temples to set up further plans. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-wan, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
So the Bank of Korea just today decided to keep its key interest rate where it is at 1.25%. There had been speculation, of course, that it might cut because of the economic impact of the coronavirus outbreak. What's the significance of an interest rate freeze at this point?
Bank of Korea has kept its policy rate steady at current 1.25% in the middle of growing economic fallouts from coronavirus outbreak. As you said previously, some financial market participants expected interest rate cut by central bank because coronavirus impact on the economy is becoming more serious. However, it looks that Bank of Korea believes that this is not the time of action. Instead, as of now, Bank of Korea is only watching how much coronavirus outbreak is affecting Korean economy. Also, central bank is worrying about lower interest rate causes another bubbles in housing market and more depreciation of Korean won.
Yeah, a lot of factors clearly pulling in different directions there in that decision. But speaking of dealing with the virus, the government's looking to set up an extra budget to support the economy. Some saying it'll be worth 10 trillion won or more. What do you make of this idea, and what do you expect will happen?
It is said that the government and ruling party together are designing over 10 trillion won supplementary budget. For reference, in 2015's MERS outbreak, the supplementary budget was about 11.6 trillion won. And under these circumstances, it is necessary to draw up a supplementary budget because the fallouts of domestic consumption and investment. It means that the only part that can support the economy is government expenditure. Also, supplementary budget is essential for providing appropriate resources to coronavirus-infected people and regions.
Well, looking at other parts of the markets, U.S. stocks were mostly down again on Wednesday. It's been a rough week or two because of the coronavirus outbreak. What's the story on Wall Street?
New York stock market was pretty mixed yesterday. Some positive views are kind of neutralized by increasing concerns on coronavirus spread in the United States. Dow Jones Industrial decreased by 46 basis points, but NASDAQ increased by 17 basis points. Major European markets slightly increased, except German market yesterday.
Yeah, and here it's been, of course, a wild ride in Korean stocks as well. Today they're down a fair bit again. They've gotten slammed in the past couple of weeks. Tell us about that.
Domestic stock market is still heavily pressed by coronavirus outbreak concerns. Rapidly and continuously increasing number of infected people gave negative impact on domestic market and real sector too. Today, Kospi dropped by 1.05%, and Kosdaq decreased by 2.51%. So these numbers are huge numbers in a single day's movements. Foreign investment and domestic institutional investors sold stock today. And today, Japanese stock market also decreased over 2.15% in a single day.
Well, now, back here in Korea, we have business sentiment, numbers showing that it's fallen among Korean companies by the biggest amount on record because of the coronavirus. We know that it's really hurting small business. How has this affected different sectors in particular, and what else is in the Bank of Korea's report for February?
According to recent business sentiment survey, February's business sentiment index decreased down to 78 level, which is the lowest level in 11 years. The general way of interpreting business sentiment index is when it is lower than 100, that is negative sign. So this low business sentiment is affected by, of course, coronavirus outbreak. The most affected businesses are, as we expect, travel and transportation, and automobile and petrochemical industries. So recently also released Bank of Korea's consumer sentiment dropped in a larger scale. So we can say that both of the consumers and manufacturers are suffering from coronavirus outbreak.
And things seem to be turning around there, a couple of months ago. And this is just out of the blue. This virus has sort of put a major dent in all that. But Professor Kim, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
South Korea's Transport Ministry is ordering the recall of more than 12,000 vehicles. The ministry said on Thursday that the recall affects 26 models made by 5 automakers: Hyundai Motor, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volkswagen Korea, and Hanbul Motors, which is the official importer of Peugeot and Citroën. It found that their cars have software problems and faulty parts. The ministry said the automakers will offer free repairs at designated service centers. The owners of the affected cars will be notified by mail or text message. Now, there are 91 public relief hospitals in South Korea. These are hospitals where sections have been divided between patients with respiratory illnesses and those without. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
This is Myeongji Hospital in Goyang, Gyeonggi-do Province. Recently, a separate clinic was set up outside the hospital's main building to receive patients with respiratory symptoms, such as coughing and sore throat.
Even if they didn't come into contact with the infected patient or show symptoms, those with a fever or respiratory issues will not be allowed inside. They will be treated at the public relief clinic.
Myeongji Hospital is one of the 91 designated public relief hospitals set up throughout South Korea to prevent respiratory patients who may have contracted COVID-19 and general patients from crossing paths. Separating patients allows the general public to visit the hospital without having to worry about being exposed to the virus. Among the 91 hospitals designated as public relief hospitals, 4 are university hospitals, 68 are general hospitals, and 19 are clinics. However, those who have a recent history of traveling abroad or have been to Daegu or the Gyeongsang-buk-do province and show respiratory symptoms are sent to a different specialty area known as the selective clinic. Among the 91 public relief hospitals designated throughout the nation, 36 cater to such patients. In order to meet the growing demand, the government is looking to designate more public relief hospitals nationwide. Those who wish to find their nearest public relief hospital can visit the Ministry of Health and Welfare's website. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
Following the Inter-Korean summit and the North Korea-U.S.